There's a spirit that defines every Tasmanian. Fight, gravel rash grit, devil-like determination. It's time to unleash this spirit on the great game. For without our boots on hallowed grounds, the AFL will never be complete, nor will we.
Hello and welcome to The Believers, Tasmania's AFL journey as we celebrate the distinguished careers of Tasmania's football heroes as the state pushes for a 19th licence for men and women in the AFL competitions. I'm Alistair Nicholson. My guest today, the Richmond forward line across the course of the last 50 years has almost always been proud, been dominated by a Tasmanian. You think of the likes of Matthew Richardson, Jack Riewoldt, going back to Royce Hart as well. My guest today was a two-time Coleman medalist, a premiership player with Richmond in 1980. He grew up in a very small town not far from Westbury. My guest is Michael Roach. Michael, welcome to you.
Thanks, Alistair.
You grew up in Cluin. Tell me about Cluin. Population, what sort of a town is Cluin? Is it actually a town?
Well, no. There's a cricket ground and a church, and there's about probably 8 or 9 families, which obviously had family. And we had a cricket side, and we go to church on Sundays, and we're just a little community, and there was no shop or anything like that, but it was just a little community not far from Westbury.
So the key pillars of your town, of your community of life there, the church and the cricket ground, and you had enough players. Was the population about 25, and you had enough players for a cricket team?
Yeah, some of them played for a long time. I mean, the wicket keeper would have been 55, 60 years of age, and as the families had families, they all came along and, helped field, and then as they grew, they played cricket, and we were a pretty good cricket side.
You had a Gibson who was pretty handy, did you?
Yes, we did. I had my first cousin, Jeff Gibson, which is Adam Gibson's father, was a very, very good cricketer, and, I know this has been said before, but I think he was probably good enough to nearly play for Tasmania, but he used to milk, so he would either bat or bowl and then leave at about 4 o'clock and have to milk the cows. So he'd make 100 and then just basically retire or get out, and then we'd all try and bat to save the game,
Your family was in farming as well? What sort of farming?
My dad worked on a farm, a big farm there. So Dad's father was on the farm as well, working for the same family. And we were on the farm till I was about 11. Then we moved into the big town of Westbury. So Dad had a sawmill with his brother, and they had logging and stuff, and made obviously timber. And that's what Dad did.
What was your childhood like? I grew up in regional Tassie, Northwest Penguin, and I remember it's a similar sized town actually to Westbury. I remember the freedom that I had as a kid. What was it like for you?
Yeah, there was just there was obviously homework, which I didn't do a lot of, but there was just kicking the footy. We had a spare block. We'd mow a cricket pitch, my brothers, and we'd have a cricket game, and then we'd just kick the footy till it was dark and go in and have dinner, and if it was still light, go out and kick the footy at the end.
Who were your footy heroes?
My footy hero was a fellow by the name of Barry Lawrence, who captained St Kilda, and Paul Viner ended up coaching Longford, and Dad and the family would go and watch Longford, and Barry Lawrence was my hero. And I followed St Kilda and got a jumper. Barry sent me over a jumper and had a St Kilda little emblem on it, and I loved St Kilda till Richmond came knocking.
Yeah, and your footy journey from a young age, where did you realise that you were pretty good at it? When did you start to get picked in teams?
Yeah, I don't really know. Like, we had a primary school, the Westbury Primary School, and we were undefeated for the year that I was at the school in, probably grade 5, grade 6. And we won the Northern Tasmanian Primary School. So we were pretty good, and I captained Northern Midlands in the footy. And we went down to Beaconsfield and had a game, and it was, I remember distinctly that I used to get my cousin Jeff Gibson's boots, because he was a good player with Longford, and I used to get his hand-me-down boots because we probably couldn't afford a new pair of footy boots. And I remember I was made captain of the Northern Midlands side, and Dad went up to Deloraine and bought a brand new pair of Adidas Striker High footy boots, my first ever pair of new footy boots, and just I think I might have slept in them. I was just so wrapped that I had a brand new pair of footy boots, and went down to Beaconsfield and played in this game, and I think I played full forward, but I had a good game and kicked 13, and then the papers, had this little picture of me, kicking 13 goals in this game.
How old were you?
About 11 or 12.
Wow.
And I suppose that was my first time I was ever in the paper. And then, I didn't know whether I was good enough, but I had a good game and a good carnival or whatever you want to call it, and played some good footy. So I suppose that was my first chance to sort of show whether I could play, I suppose.
Yeah, and then at what age do you start playing senior footy at Longford?
Well, it's a fairly long story. I played in a game to try and get in the Tasmania schoolboys side, which I was 15, I suppose, and must have shown some sort of ability because a fellow by the name of Harry Jenkins, who recruited Royce Hart and Cameron Clayton and Nolly Carter and a few of those boys, saw Mum or found Mum in the grandstand and said, we're interested in your boy coming across to Richmond. Like, I was 15, I hadn't done any, I didn't made the Tassie side, but maybe I must have shown something that Harry was interested in. And Richmond, you had to, back in those days, Alistair, you could only sign 2 interstate players a year.
Form 4.
Yeah. And I don't think Richmond were going to use a Form 4 and a 15-year-old kid, but what Richmond decided to do was myself and Shane Williams, who played for Tassie in the schoolboys side and played for Richmond and Geelong, they were going to bring us across to Melbourne as a 15-year-old kids. And if we lived in the Richmond area for 2 years, you automatically became a Richmond player without signing a Form 4. So I think Richmond were trying to dud the system, I suppose.
Yeah.
Which, were they going to use a Form 4 and a 15-year-old kid? Probably not, but they decided to. So at 15, I turned 16 at that stage. Myself and Shane lived in Tanner Street, Richmond. Shane went to Melbourne High. I wanted to work, so I ended up in the shoe department at Dimmy's, which was a store in Richmond which was renowned for, selling the sales and things like that. So, but after about 5 or 6 weeks, Mum and Dad came across and said, look, Mike, you're probably a little bit young, come back home and try and, make a name for yourself in Tassie. I'd played for the schoolboys, the Tassie schoolboys side, but I hadn't played any really senior footy apart from playing at Westbury. So I went back home and went to Longford because they were the team that you'd leave Westbury and go to Longford because they were better competition. So I went to Longford and played a couple of under-19s. So I might have played one under-19 game, and they named me in the seniors the next week. And I had a really good game. We played against East Launceston, and I kicked 5 before half-time. And I think I got carried away. I never got another kick after half-time. But all of a sudden, the papers are starting to write about this kid from Longford that, maybe can play a bit of footy. And next thing you know, the phone's ringing. It's Hawthorn, it's Collingwood, it's Geelong, it's North Melbourne. they're all wanting to put me on a Form 4.
And talking to Mum and Dad about
Mum and Dad, and the phone's ringing. We got no idea what we're doing. We say, oh, hello, Mr. Barassi. Hello, Polly Farmer. We flew across to Geelong and had a kick on the ground with Polly Farmer and Bob Davis a weekend, and then North Melbourne brought me across for a week, and I went to the cricket, the Kooyong, I think the Australian Open.
Yeah.
And all those things were to get me to sign the Form 4 with the clubs. And it was really interesting, Ron Barassi coming to Deloraine High School and stuff like that.
What did the other kids think?
Well, we had no idea. We just I wanted to play footy, but I didn't realise what it was all about, and and yes, I wanted to play, but there was no managers and mum and dad. We had no idea what we're doing, and it was exciting, but we still didn't. But Richmond, Alan Schwab was the football, I think general manager, and he was just terrific at keeping Richmond. Oh, Michael, we can't wait to have you in Richmond colours and all that. I hadn't really signed, but I had a really good game in a final game. I think we played South Launceston or something like that. Or City South, I think they were called back in those days. And I had a good game, and South Melbourne were at the dining room table on the Sunday, offering me some money to come across and, sign this Form 4. And we didn't. And then I don't know whether Richmond heard, then Richmond came across and I signed with Richmond in 1975.
Yeah, so that's another dining table conversation?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
And do you remember what they offered you at that time?
Oh, there was a brown paper bag, which was very nice. It wasn't as big as South Melbourne's brown paper bag, but it was, a 16-year-old kid with no money. It was nice having some folding.
So, why do you take the smaller bag?
I think the thing that Richmond did, not denigrating or down, the other clubs, but Richmond, Graham Richmond and Alan Schwab and Harry Jenkins, they spoke more to mum and dad about, we'll bring Michael across, we'll pay his board, we'll make sure he's got a clothing allowance, we'll put him through this, we'll do that. And they sort of spoke more about what they're going to do for their boy, I suppose, or to mum and dad.
Yep.
Where I suppose a lot of the other clubs, come across, not find your own way across, but I don't think they really spoke on what they were going to, and I think that maybe, and Richmond in 1975, we'd won 73, 74, and 75 we were, still a very good side. So I maybe thought that, and then Royce Hart was playing there and Cameron Clayton was there and Noel Carter was there. So I suppose there was a Tasmanian connection.
Yeah. Paul Sproul would have been there too, was he?
I think.
Where'd he gone?
Oh, he was there 73, 74. Yeah. Maybe he was. But I think he'd gone by the time I came across in 77. Yeah.
And was it your decision or did Betty and Terry ultimately make that decision about where you go?
We spoke about it as a family, but we still didn't have any really. I think they just wanted to make sure that Mike was going to be looked after, and I think Richmond did a terrific job in making sure that Mike was looked after.
Yeah.
And across I went, but I signed in 75, but still had another year in Tassie, and which I think was good for my footy because I played senior footy from basically 16 till 18 or nearly 18, and then I was ready to come across and try and have a go at AFL.
And part of that period was going on to represent the region as well. I brought in an
NTFA, which is the Northern Tasmanian Football Association, which, we used to go and watch the NTFA play against the Northwest Football Union and the Tasmanian Footy League. And I'm sure Darryl Baldock was playing in some of those games. And I know, Barry Lawrence represented the Northern Tasmanian Footy Association. And to be named in that side, we went down to Devonport and played against Northwest Footy Union. And I had a good game and made the Tasmanian side, senior side, which was a real honour as a, 16-year-old kid, actually.
That would have been high quality football, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it was. There was some, AFL guys had come back. I remember playing in a Tassie side with Vin Waite and Peter Hudson and Peter Daniels and there'd be other ones there if I went back. They're all AFL or VFL players, and I was playing with them, So
fantastic.
Peter Hudson was the coach, So.
Your first experiences at Richmond of playing, you're on the wing. So you're a wingman.
Yeah, so when I decided that I was going to come across and have a go at AFL or VFL back in those days, I did a year of pro running I had another first cousin, a fellow by the name of Kelvin Anderson, who played footy for Tassie, and he was a gift runner, and he won Latrobe Gift. And I trained with a fellow by the name of Peter Bowles, who actually won on this, I think it might have Bernie Gift and maybe a Latrobe Gift. And so I did a year of pro running to try and improve my speed. So for my height, I was reasonably athletic, and I never won anything. You start off the back markers anyway, but that was good discipline to be able to learn to run properly and train hard. So by the time I got to Richmond, I was pretty fit, but very skinny.
What do you remember about your early experiences? Can you remember your first game vividly, who you played on, that type of thing, and who the key players that almost you would have been in awe of, I suppose, as a youngster coming into the side? So
my first game was against Footscray at the MCG. I can't remember a lot about it. I think I played on a guy by the name of, I think it was Colin Dell or somebody like that with a Western, Footscray it was back then. But I do remember kicking my first goal in that game, and Neil Baum was the ruckman for Richmond, and I remember the big grin and handshake and all that after kicking my first goal against the Western Bulldogs, and played about 8 games in a row, which we were going okay, and then I got dropped and ended up playing in the grand final in 1977 Richmond Reserves at the MCG. So I had 9 games in my first year and I was a wingman. So I wasn't big enough to be able to play key position. So I worked hard on the weights. And 1978, I missed a lot of games. I tore my hamstring about 3 or 4 times, probably just working too hard and weight, not really preparing the body well enough. I was getting stronger, but probably not doing much flexibility work, and I kept tearing hamstrings. So 78 was a disappointing year, and then 79 I was ready to play key position.
And that's when 78 was when Tony Jewell, the coach at Richmond at the time, said to you, let's build you up, let's turn you into a key position forward.
Yeah, I think that I'd always played as a ruckman full forward, I suppose, as a junior, as a kid. I'd play on the ball and then go and have a rest at full forward. But I wasn't big enough to be able to play full forward as an 18-year-old kid, so I played on the wing, but worked very hard every morning. I'd go down to the gym. There was a guy down there that'd make us breakfast. We'd work hard and then go off to work. So I got bigger. I went from sort of mid-70 kilos up to about 90 kilos by the end of 1978. And Tony Jewell was made coach. Barry Richardson they'd moved him on, and Tony had coached us in 77 in the reserves grand final. So he was made coach, and he really trained us very hard. And he named me at full forward in a practice game against Hawthorn, who I think 78 Hawthorn win the grand final.
Yes, yep.
I played in we had a practice game either Moe or Morwell, and I was named full forward. And I remember Neil Baum being in the forward pocket, and they'd named me full forward. I mean, Royce Hart had retired, and I remember Barmy saying, "Look, I can't jump anymore." He'd trained very hard; his knees were gone. He said, "But I want you to fly for everything, and nobody's going to hurt you because I'll protect you," and all this sort of stuff. So I had a really good game, and I ended up being named the best player in that game, and I'd kicked 6 playing at full forward, and then that was basically where I played 79, 80 and 81.
You kicked 90 goals in 19 games in 1979. That's an amazing effort.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Hawthorn as well there. Mm-hmm. I reckon game 17 for you was the one where you flew on top of the Moors and took that amazing mark, wasn't it?
Yeah, I don't think it was. I think it was. Well, it was probably game 17. Yeah, it was in that about round 5 or 6, and lucky enough to get a lovely ride on the back of some Hawthorn players, and took a mark that there was a couple of cameras there, which was amazing back in those days. You could play and there'd be a couple of cameras there if you were lucky, but they were just in the right spot to take that mark, that still shot mark, which has been, it's still out there as one of the marks around, so.
It typifies what's great about our game, I reckon, though, that kind of mark where you're literally soaring above the pack. But Your mum and dad, Terry and Betty, were there that day, weren't they?
Correct.
What happened?
Well, poor old mum used to suffer with migraines, and mum hates me saying this, but she'd woken up on Saturday morning with a migraine, which was sad because she used to be ill, used to be, going to the toilet, unfortunately. And we went to the game. Mum was feeling a bit ordinary and unfortunately had her head down when I saw it above the pack and took this mark. So poor old mum missed it, and they didn't have replays back in those days. So Dad sort of said, "Did you see that, Betty?" And Betty goes, "No, what?" Mike just took this mark on the back of a couple of Essendon players. Hawthorn players. And so after the game, unbeknownst to me, I didn't know that there was some cameras had taken the snapshot of it. So I used to go back to the aftermatch, but Mum was feeling still pretty ordinary, and we just drove back I was living in Hawthorn, a little flat in Hawthorn, and we drove back, and Mum said, "I'll get some milk because I'll feel better after a cup of tea," So she goes into the milk bar, and the Herald Sun used to come out on a Saturday afternoon, and Mum comes out with about 4 or 5 Herald Suns. I'm on the front with this mark. So Mum was pleased that she'd seen it in still shot, but I was just so lucky that there was a fella from the Truth newspaper had it in colour, and a fella from the Herald Sun had it in black and white. So there was two shots in a perfect position to capture that mark. So.
Is that the best mark you ever took, do you reckon?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I don't think I ever got that high again. It was just a lucky one, and I'm rapt that it was there, and it still goes down as one of the better marks in the AFL.
Absolutely, it does. Royce Hart was at the twilight of his career when you got to Richmond, but he took you under his wing. Is that right?
Yes, he did. Yeah, Royce was playing in 77, but he was on one leg. His knee had it, but I still remember, end-to-end kicking. They used to do end-to-end kicking as warm-up, and Royce would fly back across the front of the packs and just hang on to these great marks. And when they named me full forward, he said, "Look, you've got you can really kick. You're a good kick." But he said, "You just need to have a routine." And we worked, Royce wrote out on a bit of paper 6 steps to kick for goal. He said, "These are the steps that I use to kick for goal. Would you like them? And we'll teach you these 6 steps to kick for goal." And I never changed in the whole time. I had those 6 steps. I used to, and that bit of paper, unfortunately I can't find it, but I wish I could. But I remember the steps, and I have rewritten them down. But Royce wrote them out a little bit of paper, and I'd have them in my sock and in my bag. And if I missed a goal, I would know exactly why I missed it, whether I got too close to the man or the mark, or whether I looked up too quickly, But those were the steps that Royce taught me, and I never changed. And I think in the end I was a good kick for goal. I just couldn't get it. I could still kick it, but I just couldn't get it.
No, you were so accurate during your career. Why do you think the modern day player isn't as accurate?
Well, we never used to basically leave the 50-metre arc, or if there wasn't an arc back in those days, but we never really sort of chased down the ground or tackled or did anything really. We played full forward, and I can't really say that I was ever out of breath, while I was kicking for goal. And I look back on, Nick Rewalt and those guys. Like, Nick can hardly get his breath before he's kicking for goal. And I reckon fatigue may have a little bit to play in the way they kick these days. But I'm still not sure whether they do have a routine. I get frustrated when they wobble, they're still spinning the ball as they come in to kick. But if you look back in the history of the full forwards that were good kicks for goal, Peter McKenna, Peter Hudson, Plugger, Jason Dunstall, they never changed their routine. Hudson had this hunched over, torpedo punt, but he never changed. And I think I was a good kick for goal, but I never changed my routine. I just went back. I knew how far to get back from the man in the mark. I knew what I had to do. And if I missed, I knew why I missed. And I think, Richo, he would change his routine quite a bit, because a lot of people would talk to the great Matty Richardson and say, Richo, why don't you try this? And he would, because he's such a nice person, and he'd never sort of go, no, I'll stick to the routine that I had, but he just kept changing.
Did you ever talk to him and just say, Richo, just block it out?
Yeah, well, I did. We had, I think the year he did his knee, he'd kicked 27 or 29 goals 3, and I was down there teaching him his kicking style. And
95.
And then when he came back, things had changed. I wasn't at the club. I was working and couldn't get down, and they were going full time, and they were training at 11 o'clock, and I couldn't get down there, and it'd be helping Richo at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday morning or something like that. I just couldn't do it work-wise. So he sort of changed his routine, but we had a pretty good thing going there for some stage, but he was such a great player. He'd get a lot more than what I would, but I reckon he kicked as many points as goals.
You win the Coleman Medal in 1980, a premiership year at Richmond, and in 1981. But 1980, 107 goals in the regular season, 112 all told across the course of the season. And you played your first game against Footscray. You gave them a couple of touch-ups. You kicked 11 and 10 against Footscray across the course of the season. Must be so many fond memories from 1980 to achieve the ultimate in football and be part of a premiership winning team. And on that day, I suppose it became a celebration in a way, because you knew so much was the dominance of Richmond against Collingwood. You were going to win from a fair way before the final siren.
Yeah, we had a very good side. We had some great players, and you had guys like David Cloke and Kevin Bartlett, and they were all kicking goals as well. I mean, KB kicked 21 goals in the final series. So I suppose I wasn't needed as much back then, and David was playing him poor little Andrew Ireland, who was about 6'2", and Cloakey was about 6'6" and 110 kilos. So, leave him in the goal square and sort of take my man out of the play. But we had Dale Waitman and Robbie Wiley and Jeff Rains and Jimmy Jess and great Francis Burke still playing, and we were a very good side. So, but we hadn't, we really weren't favourites, I suppose, during the year, but towards the end we were pretty red-hot favourites, and Collingwood, unfortunately, fortunately it had 3 or 4 really hard final series, and were probably worn out by the time they got to us, and we hit them hard pretty early, and the game was all over, I reckon, just in the second quarter. It was nearly all over.
Yeah, so Tony Jewell's the coach then. You mentioned Francis Burke. He replaces Tony Jewell for the 1982 season, and this coincides with a shifting of view into the ruck as well during Francis Burke's time there. Brian Taylor's been recruited from Western Australia. And how did that come about? So
it was
the
really
General
tough.
Lee was in the ruck and got injured, is that right?
Correct. Well, I don't know why, but I suppose it's good to always have some backups. But for some reason, Richmond they already had a full forward, and they kept recruiting full forwards. We had Mark Jackson, silly Jacko was around in 1980, and he kicked 130, I think it was 130 goals in the seconds and never got a game, which is amazing, to be kicking the game or the goals he kicked. And Brian was only 18 or 19 in 1980, so he wasn't quite ready. But Mark Lee broke his thumb badly and had to have some surgery on it. Emma Dunn was sort of another ruckman. There was but because Brian had been playing full forward and could really only play full forward, they threw me into the ruck. And 1982, I ran around the ruck and probably wasn't much of a ruckman, but I was able to compete, and we made the grand final. But yeah, Brian was playing full forward, so it was really sort of hard for me because that's where I played my best footy.
Yeah. So Jacko kicks 130 in the reserves and he's not getting a game. How would you describe his presence around the Richmond Football Club at the time?
Well, he didn't like me too much. We'd have one-on-one contesting, and I'd sort of go off and try and grab one of my mates like the Ghost, Jimmy Jess or somebody like that, and we'd do a bit of waxing, I suppose. You get it this time, I'll get it next time. But Jacko was pretty keen to knock my block off, I think, and get a game of footy, which is fair enough. He wanted to play AFL. He went to Western Australia, and I think he was part of the Morris Rioli thing, but Jacko came back to Melbourne and ended up playing full forward and kicking a lot of goals with Melbourne.
Was he as left of centre at that time? Was it obvious
he was different.
to you?
You'd go to the, you'd get there fairly early because they played before the seniors, and Jacko, you'd hear this noise in the crowd or on the ground, and it'd be Jacko squealing and carrying on, and it made you play a lot better because, at half-time, Jacko may have kicked 6 or 7 by half-time. You think, crikey, I've got to play well here or he'd be taking my spot. So he put pressure on me, but Tony didn't think that he'd fit into our style, and he never got a game. So, which was sad for Jacko, but not sad for me because I wanted to play full forward.
Yeah, absolutely. During your time in the ruck, you came across another slightly left of centre character in Crackers Keenan.
Correct.
What do you remember about the duels with Crackers Keenan?
I do remember this, and I'll tell you this little story. I had to go down. I don't know whether I was going down to see Mum and Dad, but I was going down to Tassie, whether we had the weekend off, whether it was a state game. I just can't remember. And I'm at the airport checking my luggage in to go to Tassie. And way back in the line, I hear this voice, Roach, you've got 2 weeks to live. And I thought, who the heck's that? Look over. It's Crackers. 2 weeks to live. I thought, 2 weeks to live? What do you mean by that? And I'm thinking, we play Melbourne. 2 weeks. He's rucking for Melbourne. So I didn't think much of it, and went down to see Mum and Dad and did what I did. And I'm at the MCG, and the Melbourne rooms and the Richmond rooms are side by side. The race was side by side. And I am watching the seconds game, and I hear this voice, Roach, 2 hours to live. I look over and it's bloody Crackers again. I thought, so that's all right. I get warmed up and we run out in the ground, and I'm just about to take 2 minutes to live. Anyway, we get to the centre bounce, and here's Crackers doing the bull thingy, like he's scraping his foot and he's counting down 10, 9, 8, 7. I'm up there, my knees are shaking it. I wasn't much of a ruckman, but I remember the ball bounced the wrong way and Crackers collided with somebody, had to go off. So I never actually got the ruck against Crackers, but he was just a character. He wasn't going to, I don't know, he could, I think he did. He liked boxing and stuff. He may have knocked my block off, but it never happened. But it was just one of those, funny things that, I never twigged what he was saying, 2 weeks to live, and then until I realised that that's who we were playing. And then he counted it down, but he never got me, thank goodness.
So Francis Burke has a couple of years. Mike Patterson comes in for a year, and then Paul Sproul coaches in 85. During that period, you're playing in the ruck, but in 85 you go back to full forward. How does that come about? And was it a relief to you to go back?
Yeah, it was a relief because I probably wasn't playing great footy. Probably 83, 84, I was running around. I was going okay because I could play centre half forward. I could play in the ruck. I wasn't much good at them, but I could play in those spots. But Brian, would be in and out. He hurt his knee. And I think at those stages we'd lost 83, we'd lost Jeff Rains and David Cloak to Collingwood. And Collingwood and Richmond were having this sort of fighting against each other, getting players from, we had Phil Walsh, we had Craig Stewart, we had John Annear, we had the two Lovett, Considine, we had all these, Craig Stewart, we had all these guys that came, Peter McCormack, all came to Richmond, and we were paying all these big money, transfer fees and things like that, and Collingwood decided to go for Brian, which was good for me and probably good for Brian that he had left Richmond and ended up kicking 100 goals with Collingwood. But I went back to full forward, and then I started to play good footy again. I think 85 may have kicked around about 80 goals, something like that. I was back in my spot.
Yeah.
But then, unfortunately, I got injured and really started to struggle sort of 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, I was struggling to get a kick and was injured most of the time.
It was a tumultuous period you played in, to be honest, but during that period when Francis Burke's the coach, you're coming off the 82 grand final loss to Carlton where you had your chances in that game. It was quite a tight contest.
The streaker, I blame.
Yeah, do you? Well, I better ask you about that. What are your recollections?
I don't really remember a lot about it, but I remember, sort of, what in the heck's this noise? We could hear this noise, and next thing out of the corner of my eye, I think I was playing centre half forward, and Jimmy Jess was playing on Bruce Dool, and she ran near the Ghost and Kevin Bartlett, and I think she liked bald blokes. I think it was the Ghost, Bruce Dool and Kevin Bartlett, and she ran towards them. I thought, well, what the heck's this, And just a shock, just a wow, She was fairly close. And I thought, gee, I couldn't concentrate after that, so I'll blame her for 1982, the grand final loss, Helen Demicchio.
Yeah, Maurice Rioli is on.
Brilliant.
What a brilliant play, but and was very important in that game as well. But there's a feeling that Jeff Rains, 3 best and fairest, right. Very good midfielder, David Cloak as well, feeling that they're being underpaid in comparison, and that's part of the reason.
And I think the thing is, we had a really good side, and we just, I suppose I can look back and say, well, BT went to full forward, which was my spot. And Jeff Rains was an all-Australian centreman, 3 times best and fairest winner, probably the best centreman in Australia, and they bring Morris in and put him in the centre. Now, Morris could have played anywhere. He's that good. He could have played anywhere. But Jeff's nose was out of joint, I suppose, and I think Morris's contract was, to get him across, was pretty big.
Yep.
And I think word got out that he was getting more than what the best centreman in Australia was getting. And Rainsy started to look around, I think. And David Cloak, he was captain of our side in 1982, and he was getting less than what, say BT was getting or something. So Richmond just stuffed it up.
Yeah.
They really did stuff it up.
Yeah. During that period, because you're playing in the ruck, you're moved into the ruck, and I'd imagine you were frustrated because you knew I'm best at full forward, and that's reflected in your performances. Did you ever come close to leaving?
There was a couple of little offers from a couple of clubs that, that there'd be a chance that I could go. I never wanted to go. I never wanted to leave Richmond. But if I wasn't playing good footy, I needed to be out there playing my best footy, and I I could play in other positions, but not very well. I was still good enough to be in their side, or in our side, but wasn't playing well enough. So, yeah, Brian went to Collingwood, and I went back to full forward, and then I started to play better again.
Yeah, you kicked.
But I mean, that sounds like that's because my nose was out of joint. It wasn't. Well, it was, but I just had to. You know what I mean? I just wanted to play footy, and we wanted to win, but I played my better footy at full forward.
Well, 79 to 81 and then 85 and 86. So those 5 seasons when you played at full forward, you kicked 430 goals in 102 games. So you're averaging over 4 a game during that period, which puts you in the absolute top bracket in terms of goals average.
I never looked at it like that.
Do you feel like you had an outstanding career, but do you feel like you were robbed of a few good years potentially?
No, I don't look back on it that. I played 200 games and 600 and something goals. I was pretty happy with that. I was lucky to get to my 200th. It looked like there was a chance that I probably might play 250, but I just got injured in the end. I was having, back operations, and I ruptured both Achilles basically, and that was really my footy career. And running around trying to jump when I couldn't after my Achilles was snapped, or certainly in the left Achilles was the nasty one, which is the leg I jumped off. So really I was, lucky to get to 200 games in the end.
Just looking at the coaches you played under, so there was Barry Richardson, Tony Jewell, Francis Burke, Mike Patterson, Paul Sproul, Tony Jewell again, and your last season was under Kevin Bartlett, wasn't it? So I've heard Dale Waitman talk about this before. He says that the chopping and changing, the uncertainty, the turmoil at Richmond at the time, it feels like that not only cost him finals, but probably cost him the chance to win more premierships. After 82, you didn't get back in the finals, did you? Do you feel the same way about that?
I do. We just stuffed it up. and that I shouldn't say stuffed it up, but we just really mucked it up. We just had a really good side, and it was just, I just think, bad management. Why would you want to leave Richmond? Well, people did leave Richmond. And they shouldn't have left Richmond. It was just if they had the right managers and the right people there, not arguing against Collingwood and not arguing against, nobody leaves Richmond. Well, people do leave Richmond, and we lost our two best players in David Cloke and Jeff Rains to Collingwood. And then we really did struggle. We just got players in there. And in the end, we had no money to go and get players. We were broke in 1988 and 89. We were rattling tins to be paid ourselves and to keep the mighty Richmond Football Club going.
You were a key part of that, weren't you? You really invested heavily in the survival of the club.
I worked at the club to help. They had a thing called the coterie, and I was in between jobs. I'd left Merritt Hassett, the sports people, and Richmond asked me to come and try and help the coterie out, try and build that back up, and we got it back up. They were putting some good money, but it wasn't really enough to save the club. So, yeah, I was invested. I mean, I didn't want our club to be gone. There was a chance that we were going to go to Gold Coast or set a club up there, and we had Alan Bond. My life membership is signed by Alan Bond. And Alan Bond didn't even know our best and fairest winner's name, which was Dale. He called him Dale Weinman. Like that's. So we did lose our way, like the great Flea didn't even know his name. The president didn't know his name. So we just lost our way.
Yeah. Did it, when Richmond broke through after 37 years and won the premiership in 2017, knowing what you'd been through and helped save the club, to see that moment when the premiership cup was lifted again, how did it make you feel?
Oh, just amazing. Just amazing. Like, I was lucky enough to, my son Tom played 11 games at Richmond under the father and son. And, they supported Richmond because Dad played there, and I remember him saying to me, Dad, when those clubs, put that money on the dining room table back when you were 16 years of age, you could have gone to Hawthorn, couldn't you? Well, they've won 12, Dad, And I said, well, yeah, but now they're very proud to be Richmond. I mean, we've had, 3 of the last 5 grand finals, and to have them, tears in their eyes, to be proud Richmond people. And me, I had tears in my eyes, and looking back at Richo and Benny Gale, the Tasmanians that have had a lot to do with the success of Richmond Footy Club was huge.
Yeah, the Tassie connection is enormous.
Yeah.
And right through the club, if you look at it, 5 Richmond players have kicked in excess of 600 goals, and 3 of them are from Tasmania. Yourself, Jack Rewalt, Matthew Richardson.
Yeah, and then you got Royce Hart, who
probably would have. Had he
played centre-half forward. He was just an absolute champion and probably one of the best centre-half forwards ever. But I'll tell you this little story. I take a bit of credit for the grand final because when I was working at the club, we had nobody to recruiting. There was nobody really doing recruiting. Or we had a recruiting person, but he was busy. And they said, would you like to go down and have a look at a player that down at Burnie's playing with Burnie? Could you go down and have a look and give your opinion on whether you think this young fella can play? So I flew down to Launceston. Dad picked me up and we hopped in the car and drove down to West Park, correct?
Yeah.
And parked around the boundary line on the hill and watched a game. I was there to look for a fellow by the name of Errol Bourne. Now, Errol played footy for Tassie and was a very good player.
He really rose in state games. He'd run through brick walls.
Yeah, he was a tough little fella, and he had a very ordinary game the day I went to watch. He just struggled to get into the match. But coming out from full forward was this guy who ended up kicking 5 or 6 goals. And I said to Dad, give us that footy record here for a minute. Or I forget, I think it was called the footy record. I'm not sure what it was called. I have a look and it was B. Gale. I said, Gale. Anyway, so watched the game and Brendan's playing really well and kicking all these goals. And I got out to stretch my legs at half time, and Grant Alford, who played for Tassie
and Richmond,
yeah, was walking around, and he recognised me because I was still playing AFL or VFL. Oh, g'day, Michael. What do you do? I said, I'm here to say, could you tell me a bit about Brendan Gale? He said, he comes up. He's studying down at uni. He doesn't train. He just plays. And so I went back to Richmond. I said, look, Errol's a good player, but I don't think we've got Flea Waitman and we've got Trent Nichols and we've got all these little rovers. And I don't think, I said, but Brendan Gale, he can play. So they went and recruited him. So, well, I think Benny's, 240 games, the CEO of a premiership, and I'll take the credit that I helped recruit Brendan Gale and save Richmond Footy
Absolutely.
Club.
So if you go back to 89, 90, you helped save the club there in some way, but perhaps the greatest thing you did to save the club was get Brendan Gale to Richmond.
Well, his brother was already playing.
Yeah.
I mean, his brother was playing for Fitzroy and a very good player, Michael, or they call him Butch. And Brendan was a terrific player for Richmond Footy Club. And look now, he was, Players Association, then CEO of Richmond Footy Club. So I'll take a bit of credit for that.
Absolutely. The Richmond Goal Kicking Award is named in your honour.
Yeah,
Jack
which is
Rewald's,
a lovely honour.
Yeah.
Yeah, lovely honour. I look back. I mean, I don't know why they did it, but I suppose I've kicked the most goals in a season at Richmond, so that's an honour. And to be named the Michael Roach Goal Kicking Award is amazing. And I often think I won it 7 times, but Jack's won at 10 and Richo won at 13. So maybe we should we should change it. But I'm not going to suggest Richmond do that.
Yeah.
But I'm very honoured. But I didn't really have to change my speech very much for Matty Richardson at the end of the year functions. It was, and the winner is, and I just had the same speech they had the year before because Richo won it most years.
Do you like that Jack wears your old number?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I mean, they gave it to Tommy played 11 games. He had number 22. And then when Terry Wallace came, Jeff Raines' boy Andrew got number 4 and Tom was given number 8. Kane Pettifer offered up the jumper for Tom, which was lovely to have your son. But unfortunately, Tom only played in 3 games in number 8. But, yeah, then when Tom got moved on, Jack took it, and I'm very, very proud that he's got number 8.
You're obviously proud of where you come from. You're proud to have represented Tasmania and you've had a wonderful football career. What do you think it would mean for Tasmania to have its own team?
It's so important. Yes, every Tasmanian's got their own team they barrack for. Like I barracked for St Kilda as a kid, but then went and played with Richmond. So St Kilda's gone. And Tassie, that'll happen in Tassie. They'll have a side that their second side hopefully might be Tasmania, but then their main side will be Tasmania, and then Richmond or St Kilda or whatever will become their second side. So I think it's important that Tasmania get their own side, and they will support it. And I think the good thing about that stadium that they're talking about, people will go. They've just got to realise that, yes, they've got to have a stadium, and you've just got to go. If you want to watch it, you've got to go down there. So people from Burnie and people from Launceston, just jump in your car and go and watch the best footy.
It's not that far anymore.
It's not that far. I mean, I know when I used to work with Merritt Hassett, the sports people, and we had a little shop in Hobart, and I'd say to Mum, I'm come up for the night, all that way, like it's really only a couple of hours, and living in Melbourne, it takes you that long to get home sometimes, you're only sort of 10 kilometres from home. So people will get used to it and people will support it. It may take a little while and it may take a while for us to be any good, but we've just got to just get behind it and we'll be fine.
What was your reaction when you saw the plans for the stadium, $750 million stadium on the waterfront?
I just think it's so important that it's near the centre of town. I mean, where people on Friday night can go to the game, walk across, leave their office, go across, watch the game, jump in their car and go home. I think Bell Reeve's nice, but it's a fair way out and it's hard to get a park and it's hard to get, taxis and I think it's important that they have. I mean, look at Adelaide and look at West Coast and look at the MCG. They can walk to it. You know, they can get to the ground, and I think Hobart having their own stadium near Hobart City is awesome, and it'll be fantastic. And especially if there's a roof on it, if it gets a bit windy and nasty, the roof's there. You know,
you're one of the best stadiums in the world.
It will, yeah.
I've got 10 quick Tasmanian questions for you.
Hopefully I can answer them.
You will have no issues here, although it can be a bit tricky because you've got to separate a few greats first up. Who is the greatest footballer Tasmania has ever produced?
You can't really, like I loved Royce Hart, you know. I mean, Royce was, but then you got Ian Stewart, then you got Darryl Baldock, then you got Peter Hudson. I mean, I'd say 4 or 5 of them, you know. I'm not going to put... Well, Royce because he was Richmond, but then Ian Stewart won 3 Brownlows, and then Darryl Baldock went back home and he was coaching when he was about 20, you know. So I don't know. I'll say Royce, but and then you've got Richo, and then you got Jack. You know, so I don't know. There's so many good players.
All right, what should the team be called? The Tasmanian team. What should its nickname be?
I'd love the Devils, but I don't know whether it's a patent on that. I don't know.
I think football might own it, actually, that patent.
Yeah, I think the Devils. Tassie Devils or the Tassie. Well, you can't have the Tigers because you've already got one. So, yeah, I'd have to say the Devils, I think that'd be good.
Team colours?
A bit of green. It's got to have the green. Yeah, I don't mind them to have, I mean, it's not a bad jumper, Tasmania.
Ripper.
It's a ripper jumper. So, yeah. Whether that's, I mean, it's not all that fashionable, I suppose, a dark green, but I don't know.
A nice point of difference.
Yeah.
Who should be the club's inaugural coach?
Well, all depends when it is. I mean, the Clarkson's making noises, isn't he? He'd be pretty handy.
We'll take him.
We'll take him. I mean, Rocket's had a couple of goes at it, but Rodney's been a pretty good, he's, you know, coached into a grand final, so Rocket, but he's still coaching, but he may be a bit long in the tooth now.
Inaugural president. Anyone? What about M. Roach?
No way.
President.
No, I couldn't handle that. I wouldn't be any good. I mean,
that bloke you recruited might be all right.
Yeah, he'd be all right. That's if he ever wanted to go back home. I mean, Benny's pretty set in his ways here, but he's got his wife's Tasmanian as well, so maybe, yeah, fair CEO.
My word. Should Tasmania's theme song be something new or something more traditional?
I think it'd have to be new, wouldn't it? I think you'll have to make one. I don't know who would do it, but there'd be somebody out there. I think, has Tassie got, I don't know whether they've got one. I don't think I ever sang it.
In a state game, anything like that?
Don't think so.
I know the cricket team's got Tigerland, but I'm not sure about
Well, yeah, but you can't have the Tigers. You can't have Richmond.
We're taking over, Michael.
No, you can't. It's one thing the Tigers have got. It's the best theme song in the AFL. Tassie's not getting that. I'll give them some other things.
Okay,
they can't have that one.
All right. Maybe you'd be generous here then. If Tasmania was to get free rein on one current player, say Tasmania was coming into the competition next season and we had free rein on one player in the competition, who would you pick?
Well, Dusty's absolutely brilliant, but you're not having him. Yeah. Well, it'd be nice if there was a Tasmanian, you know, absolute superstar, but there probably isn't superstars at the moment. But Christian Petrarca's playing pretty well, isn't he?
Okay.
And he's only, what's Christian, 25? So if it was next year, yeah, well, he's pretty good. You've got to build a side somewhere.
I reckon give it a couple of years and you'll be thinking more about when it comes to Tassie and not so much about Richmond, Michael. Where would you recommend a tourist visit in Tasmania? What's a must-go-to spot?
Clewen Cricket Ground.
Is it still there?
I think it's got sheep on it. I think the pitch is gone. I don't know. It may have the shed still there, but I don't think so. No. Tassie's just got so many great spots. It's Wineglass Bay's pretty popular, isn't it? So, yeah, I'd say Port Arthur's good. It's got bad memories, I suppose, for a lot of people, but there's so many beautiful spots. Yeah.
The siren sounded. You're 5 points down. Which Tasmanian player, current or former, would you trust to kick the winning goal?
Well, trust to kick the winning goal would be two. One would be Peter Hudson and Royce Hart. I mean, they were the best kicks. So, I mean, I don't think they kick it very far at the moment. I mean, Jack's pretty good. Probably not Richo, but it'd be nice if Richo kicked the winning goal because he's through and through Tasmanian.
Isn't he?
Yeah.
Michael Roach, are you a believer?
I am a believer. We've got to do it. We've got to have a side. I mean, all these other sides from all over Australia, and Tassie hasn't got one. And if you look back, I mean, the Tasmanian team of the century, they're some of the best players ever to play AFL, and we need a side.
Michael, love chatting to you today. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thanks, Alistair.